Hello! Aparchi has the pleasure of hosting His Eminence Archbishop Makarios of Australia. It is a great pleasure and honor to have you here with us. Your Eminence, welcome.
Thank you very much. For me, it is a joy and an honor and a blessing to be with you. Firstly, because in this way I am given the opportunity to communicate with the people who follow you, what we call them in modern language, the subscribers or followers. So, with all of them, to whom I greet with the resurrectional greeting, and I say Christ is risen, which is a greeting with very great spiritual and theological meaning. And of course, thank you, Father Joseph, who, while you have many options to choose from, you thought of us in Australia, which is at the other corner of the earth, yet continues to be a part of our Orthodox Church.
Truly He is risen, Your Eminence. The place where you bear witness is a little far for us to visit. And because it's a bit far away for us and our viewers do not know much about Australia, it's very important that you convey to us what does Orthodoxy look like in Australia. What does Orthodoxy mean for Australia?
Now, Orthodoxy, what it means for Australia. The Orthodox witness above all else and how it can be safeguarded to exist in Australian society, in the Australian state on the one hand, and on the other hand to have a testimony that is actually Orthodox because, you know, today we live in a time, in a period when many people talk about love, but don't respond to what Orthodox theology says when it refers to the term love. Many people talk about the sacred canons or rules, but they are not the appropriate people to interpret and present and use the sacred canons. And many talk about orthodoxy, but they are not the appropriate people to speak and bear witness to the Orthodox testimony, and that is why we have testimonies that are considered Orthodox testimonies, but they are not Orthodox.
Και γι' αυτό έχουμε και μαρτυρίες που θεωρούνται μαρτυρίες ορθόδοξες, αλλά δεν είναι ορθόδοξες.
So we are trying to give this correct Orthodox testimony of the Orthodox Church in the Australian society, which is a testimony of love, peace, and truth. The Orthodox Church has these three things. So an Orthodox witness cannot exist without love, it cannot exist without peace, and it cannot exist without truth. When we have all this, we have the gospel and the decisions of the fathers and the councils and the patristic teachings. We have them all close to us.
Όταν τα έχουμε όλα αυτά, έχουμε και το Ευαγγέλιο και τις αποφάσεις των πατέρων και των συνόδων και την πατερική διδασκαλία, όλα τα έχουμε κοντά μας.
If I'm not mistaken, a few days ago you completed 4 years since the Church, and His All Holiness decided to send you to Australia to be in this place. What did you encounter in going there? What difficulties, what problems or issues? What does a bishop face in the Australian society on a day-to-day basis?
Δοξάζω το Θεό, καταρχάς.
I praise God, first of all, for this gift which He has reserved for me in my life, which was not expected, to be honest. And for that I enjoy and rejoice in this appointment because I really think it was a gift from God. And indeed, if I may submit an intimate thought, which I have constantly seeing how we are in Australia, the needs, the details of the local church, I believe that God has been preparing me for the past 45 years for this position, for this ministry, for this responsibility, because it is a great responsibility. So I found myself in Australia, I praise God. I am grateful towards our most holy patriarch who is also my elder, and I favor and thank him who, in spite of my unworthiness, has entrusted me with this very large and popular, I should say, position of Archbishop of Australia.
Που παρά την αναξιότητά μου με εμπιστεύθηκε αυτή την πολύ μεγάλη και επίζηλη, θα έλεγα, θέση του Αρχιεπισκόπου Αυστραλίας. Όταν πήγα εκεί, τι βρήκα, τι
Now, when I went there, what I found, what I encountered, we know from the experience and history of the Church that every change has its difficulties, and sometimes the difficulties are inordinate. Sometimes the difficulties are the expected. We try, based on the condition of each human and always with the Church and the Church's interest and the salvation of the people in mind, to overcome difficulties and to move on to the next day. I think we are now past that transition stage, and we are on a good path, and altogether, united as the Archdiocese of Australia has never before been. We move on to the next day, which is nothing more than, or there are no special plans but, the salvation of mankind and attaining holiness. This is the purpose of the Church, namely to put the gospel into practice in our lives. And when this is done, then we continue living and going down the correct path.
Αυτός είναι ο σκοπός της Εκκλησίας, δηλαδή να κάνουμε το Ευαγγέλιο πράξη στη ζωή μας. Και όταν αυτό γίνεται, τότε προχωρούμε σωστά και καλά.
Πόσο διαφορετικά είναι τα δεδομένα?
How different is the human condition there in Australia compared to Greece, and what we have as a picture?
Έτσι όπως θέτεται το ερώτημα είναι λίγο δύσκολο να το απαντήσω.
The way you ask the question is a bit difficult to answer, because you ask what is the condition of life in Australian, and I imagine you have in mind that Australia is a metropolis, like the metropolises of Greece, or the metropolises that we have in mind. But Australia is a huge place. It's about twice the size of Europe. I'm saying this, not to say that the Archdiocese is huge, but to tell you that the personality and characteristics of the people from region to region are completely different, and so I can't give you a specific answer. Others are the needs and the idiosyncrasies of the people of Sydney. Others are in Melbourne, others in Adelaide, others are in Brisbane, others in Perth. So, since I am the shepherd of these people, I will have to make local visits to listen to the needs and the problems of the people of each geographical region. And that's what we're trying to do. And depending on the needs, depending on the situation, we try to do what I said before, to give the testimony of the gospel and convince people how to make the gospel a way of life.
Και αυτό προσπαθούμε να κάνουμε. Και ανάλογα τις ανάγκες, ανάλογα τα δεδομένα, προσπαθούμε να κάνουμε αυτό που σας είπα προηγουμένως, να δώσουμε τη μαρτυρία του Ευαγγελίου και να πείσουμε τους ανθρώπους πώς να κάνουν το Ευαγγέλιο τρόπο ζωής.
Το ελληνικό στοιχείο στην Αυστραλία είναι πολύ έντονο.
The Greek element in Australia is very strong, as we know. Does the metropolis have only Greek communities, or are there natives who have...
There is an attempt at an internal missionary effort now. During my time, we have established 7 missionary parishes. We establish parishes that are directly under the Archdiocese, and we do this for 2 reasons.
Εμείς ιδρύουμε ενορίες που υπάγονται κατευθείαν στην Αρχιεπισκοπή και αυτό το κάνουμε για 2 λόγους.
One, because I don't think we should go into the process to leave the Greek language and use English. On the other hand, if we don't use English, we can't have a mission in the Australian society. To ensure these 2 facts, we keep the Greek parishes that already exist without tampering with them, without changing them, and we establish English-speaking missionary parishes from scratch, from zero. We did it experimentally. Already at a monastery we have in Perth, at the Monastery of St. John, we have 2 churches. One is the Church of St. John and the other is the Church of St. Paisios, the Athonite. At the same time, we are celebrating the Divine Liturgy in Greek in the Church of St. John. The Divine Liturgy is celebrated in the church in English right next door. But only Greek and only English. What does that mean? What's going on? Especially there in this area where we have people who are 6th generation Greek. The whole family goes to church together. The grandparents go to the Greek Divine Liturgy. The grandchildren go to the English language service. We did it experimentally to see how it would work. We see that it works great. And on the basis of that principle, that effort we are trying to establish now English-speaking, and we have established English-speaking parishes in other areas. It's going very, very well. I am very, very at peace and happy with this, and I'm also optimistic that this will be, in any case, the solution for the future.
Σε άλλες περιοχές και πάει πάρα πολύ καλά, είμαι πάρα πολύ αναπαυμένος και χαρούμενος και είμαι και αισιόδοξος ότι αυτό θα είναι, εν πάση περιπτώσει, η λύση για το μέλλον.
Θα μπορούσε να πει κάποιος ότι μήπως όμως με αυτόν τον τρόπο...
One could say that the Greek language might be lost in this way, because maybe the liturgy was...
But this is the point, not to lose the Greek language, because if we handled it differently as, say, it's done in other provinces, that is to say, half Greek, half English, and then we go from 50-50 to 80-20, and then from 80% English we go 90 to 95, the Greek language will be lost. While in this way none of the outsiders can say, or those who have mixed marriages can say, we're English speaking, why are we not given the opportunity to hear the service in our own language? We tell them that English-speaking parishes already exist in the big cities. We give them the address so that they can go listen to as much English as you want. But we don't get rid of the Greek language either. The Greek language is part of our identity. It is the language of theology. We should keep through the language our unique personality and our identity, because this is another element that has been observed. Once we let go of our language thinking we're offering something pastoral, it means we start to lose our identity, and that's what we have to watch out for.
Σημαίνει ότι αρχίζουμε να χάνουμε την ταυτότητά μας και αυτό πρέπει να το προσέξουμε.
Do you want to give us some further details about Hellenism in Australia?
As much as I can, I believe that the good Greeks outside of Greece are found in Australia. Of course, if they can hear me now from Germany, from Great Britain, from America, they'll tell me that I'm wrong. But we also say a proverb in Crete. You must know it too, Father Joseph. If you don't praise your house, what happens? It will fall and crush you.
Τι γίνεται?
Θα πέσει να σε...
Θα πέσει να σε πλακώσει. Αλλά εγώ δεν το λέω για αυτό το λόγο. Το λέω γιατί το πιστεύω.
But that's not why I'm saying it. I say it because I believe it. We have very nice Greeks, very good Greeks in Australia who believe in God. They love their hierarch, their shepherd, they love the church, they love the archdiocese, they help the church, walk with the church, have faith in the church. They trust. They keep the customs, the traditions. They love the Greek language. How can someone not be moved by all of this? And I can't take it for granted either. I appreciate the people, and that's why every time I go to churches, I'm always praising them. And so this fact makes me love the people, and objectively, I say I will correct it, that Australian Greeks are among the best. If you don't want me to say the best, I would say they're among the best in the world.
You're sharing with us a warmth, I'd say, in terms of the participation of the people, and maybe even in worship, I don't know, as far as here in Greece, you know, because it's all gradually wearing off. It is another picture.
Don't be afraid. It is, if you'll excuse me, it is trends. Sometimes we will see that people will be drawn to the church. At some point there will be a decrease, then again there will be a crisis, and the world will get its bearings again. These things come and go. Nor, of course, will we measure the power of the Orthodox Church with the number of churchgoers. Other things are those which show our Orthodox and ecclesiastical identity. And I say that I could use this, because everywhere I go there are thousands of people who come and participate in both the homilies and the liturgies. We have traditionally, it has become a custom, after the Divine Liturgy, I will always give out about an hour's worth of Indideron, the blessed bread. So many people come and there is a great participation, but that doesn't mean we have a truer and more correct orthodoxy than they have in other parts of the world, where there is not this warmth and this number of churchgoers.
Γνήσια και πιο σωστή ορθοδοξία από ό,τι έχουν σε άλλα μέρη του κόσμου, που δεν υπάρχει αυτή η ζέση και αυτός ο αριθμός των εκκλησιαζομένων.
Ποιηματικά έρχεστε αντιμέτωπος.
Pastorally, are you facing some modern problems?
Certainly. The big problem we have to deal with everywhere worldwide is secularization. Secularization as far as the interior of the church is concerned. For example, secularization of our clergy, secularization of our church officials, secularization of the archbishop, the bishops. This creates a problem.
Κοσμίκευση του αρχιεπισκόπου, των επισκόπων. Αυτό δημιουργεί ένα πρόβλημα.
And the other is the secularization that exists anyway in modern society. And it's a tragic phenomenon, and we need to see how this secularization is going to be dealt with without creating wounds in people's souls. And that takes a great deal of mastery.
Να δημιουργήσουμε πληγές στις ψυχές των ανθρώπων. Και αυτό θέλει πάρα πολύ μαεστρία. Θέλει πάρα πολύ μαεστρία.
It's not easy to tell young kids today you can't be involved with social media, so they'll say bye, respectfully. You're a century behind. And they may be right, but we can't say that anymore. It's a different set of facts, but it's a point of secularization, and we need to see how, with this situation, will the church be able to work to move forward, as I said before, to the next day.
Για να προχωρήσουμε, όπως είπα και προηγουμένως, στην επόμενη μέρα. Εκοσμίκευση όσον αφορά τα δεδομένα της κοινωνίας, επίσης έχουμε...
In terms of society, we also have secularization with modern legislation. I will give you an example, or rather two. In the state of Victoria, it is illegal by law to withhold people confession.
By law?
By law. That is, if someone were to, let's say, make a confession for a misdemeanor which is legally actionable and the clergyman doesn't go and report it, not to create an issue, let's say like these things happened recently with the Catholic Church, that some of the clergy didn't go to say anything, and they covered that up too. Not to cover, you are automatically deemed to be obliged by law when they confess to you something that is reprehensible to go straight to the police station to report it.
Θεωρείται ότι είσαι υποχρεωμένος από τον νόμο όταν σου εξομολογηθούν κάτι που είναι επιλήψιμο να πας κατευθείαν στο αστυνομικό τμήμα να το καταγγείλεις.
This has been done under Roman Catholics, apparently, which some might.
I don't want to say why. It doesn't affect us, but it's a fact that exists right now. That's the law in Victoria and in South Australia and where the capital is Adelaide. Not to get into other issues related to identity, gender, the sexual orientation, and things like that, but we have those to deal with. I believe that soon they will come to Greece, and the Greek hierarchs should also, and the Greek clergy, to be ready to deal with such situations.
Να είναι έτοιμοι να αντιμετωπίσουν τέτοιες καταστάσεις.
And of course, we have to be ready not to attack, but to prepare and catechize our people. This, Father Joseph, is very, very important. And we have to realize it, because sometimes we think that we will react to some situations with the offensive. While this is not always the only way of dealing with things, being on the offensive is not always the answer. We have other options in the Orthodox Church.
Πραγμάτων η επίθεση. Έχουμε και άλλες επιλογές στην Ορθόδοξη Εκκλησία.
This is exactly where I wanted to come, Your Eminence, because so many times Christians are perhaps tempted to respond like this with an aggression. I would like you to explain and how you personally experience it in relation to the state with the Church and under circumstances such as those you described earlier with this kind of legislation, but also in general, how should a Christian exactly see his relationship with the state and with secular authority?
In the life of the Church, we have examples of saints that we cannot disagree with and reject them for being aggressive. We have examples in the First Ecumenical Council. You will read about St. Nicholas, about St. Athanasius. I do not consider that this should be the only and the main standard. That is, I believe the offensive or aggression does not bear fruit today. We need to respond with sweetness, with love, with persuasion, with dialogue. We need to give our own testimony, especially when we don't speak for ours. Because in Australia, I'm a minority. I can't deal with the government, the state, or the legislative bodies. I am asked, and this is something that definitely gives me a responsibility, but it also gives me an honor, something that is not usually done here in Greece, even though it's an Orthodox state. For all these laws, I am called upon to express an opinion, and I've been to the House of Representatives a couple of times for similar legislation, and I've put forward my views. And legislation has changed many times for some things.
Και έχω πάει και 1-2 φορές και στη Βουλή για παρόμοια νομοθετήματα και έχω καταθέσει την άποψή μου και έχουν αλλάξει πολλές φορές για κάποια πράγματα.
Maybe it's not the time to give specific examples, but I can say, for example, that in the state of New South Wales, a euthanasia bill was very close to passing. I was asked to go to the House of Representatives, and I and other religious leaders put forward our views, and ultimately the bill did not pass. The voice was heard of the religious leaders, including the Greek Archbishop.
Μπορεί να επανέλθει με κάποια άλλη τοπική κυβέρνηση. Αυτό όμως που έχει σημασία είναι το ότι εισακούστηκε η φωνή της τοπικής εκκλησίας. Εισακούστηκε η φωνή των θρησκευτικών ηγετών, μεταξύ των οποίων και του Έλληνα Αρχιεπισκόπου.
Therefore, I believe we should have dialogue. We need to have love. I don't think aggression helps so much. We need to testify our testimony, and certainly something which has been forgotten, because both St. Athanasius, who is invoked by man, and St. Nicholas, who is invoked by many, were men of prayer. Those who attack many times today, in the name of the gospel and of the faith, by the image you see of some people, you realize they're not prayerful people without judging them. But that's my opinion, which I have the right to testify. The prayerful man is praying, and it is evident who he is. The prayerful man has a different heart. His mind is different. His perception is different. Because as you know it better than me, Father Joseph, because you too are a prayerful man. The man who prays, what does he do, that is? To pray means standing before God, standing in front of God, and you can't help but melt out of such a relationship. You can't help but be moved by such an experience. So therefore, with love, with dialogue, with our own testimony, which we testify with truth always. We do not negotiate the truth. Always with truth we give our testimony, and we put one in, and God takes care of the remaining 999.
Με αλήθεια πάντοτε, καταθέτουμε τη μαρτυρία μας και αναμένουμε εμείς ένα βάζουμε και τα υπόλοιπα 999 τα κάνει ο Θεός.
Your Eminence, since you mentioned secularism, and we've gone over the relationship between the Church and the state, to take you a little bit in a broader field, in relation to everything that's been going on lately, with a war that is staying on the European map, and the ecclesiastical implications of this war. First of all, how should we deal with the concept of war within our own ecclesiastical tradition?
Καταρχάς, πώς πρέπει εμείς να αντιμετωπίζουμε την έννοια του πολέμου μέσα στη δική μας εκκλησιαστική παράδοση.
This is clear now. That is, no war is justified in the Orthodox Church. There is no such thing as the theology of war in the Orthodox Church. This is clear. That is, we can no longer try to argue to justify and support things that are a given for the Orthodox Church. That is, it is like saying now that it is a given that the Holy Trinity for the Orthodox Church is the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. This does not change. Some things don't change. There is no war that is justified according to Orthodox theology unless it is a defensive war. In this case, I do not find that we have a defensive war on the part of those who invaded Ukraine. It's not a pleasant situation. I don't think anybody has a good mind and is happy. No one who is Orthodox, in the correct sense of the word.
Δεν είναι ευχάριστη κατάσταση. Δεν νομίζω ότι κανείς έχει έφρον νους. Κανένας Ορθόδοξος. Δεν νομίζω ότι Ορθόδοξος με την κανονική σημασία.
Because we said before that there are Orthodox people who say they are Orthodox, but they have nothing to do with the Orthodox Church. I don't think anyone who is Orthodox will agree with this war and with any war. I don't have anything specific with this war. We don't agree with any war. You can't kill people. And you know, you'll see in the holy canons, Father Joseph, that a murderer, someone who has killed someone else, receives the highest penance. That is, in the minds of the fathers who instituted and composed the holy canons, he who has killed another individual is considered to have committed the greatest sin. Therefore, the greatest penalty given for a sin is for the sin of murder. It's cruel what's going on. We can't agree with it.
Είναι σκληρό αυτό που γίνεται. Δεν μπορούμε να συμφωνήσουμε.
Let alone when there's a sense that the Church in all of this has some kind of involvement, or when they bless the war.
It is involved. In my humble opinion, I think I was clear, and I repeat it again, that no war is blessed and no war is justified. In the Orthodox Church, there is no theology of war.
Δεν επευλογείται και δεν δικαιολογείται κανένας πόλεμος. Στην Ορθόδοξη Εκκλησία δεν υπάρχει θεολογία του πολέμου.
In relation to a general ecclesiastical stance, a rather stance in the Church of Russia, in connection with an attempt to perhaps find ways of an ecclesiastical domination, perhaps in relation to the events that have also happened with the Patriarchate of Alexandria. How do you see this whole trend that we have been seeing lately in the Russian world?
Ίσως σε σχέση και με τα γεγονότα που έχουν συμβεί και με το Πατριαρχείο Αλεξανδρίας. Πώς βλέπετε όλη αυτή την τάση την οποία εντοπίζουμε το τελευταίο καιρό στο ρωσικό κόσμο?
Είναι αυτό που λέτε.
It is what you say, the predominance in the Russian world, but which is not a trend or a situation, or a recent programming that has been around for the past few years. It has been around for a very long time, this trend of spreading Russian propaganda. I don't know if this will be accepted by the Orthodox Church as a whole, despite the fact that it now seems that the Russians are gaining ground. But you know, All this takes time.
Αλλά ξέρετε, όλα αυτά χρειάζονται το χρόνο τους.
And let's not forget that in the Orthodox Church, at the end of the day, what ultimately prevails is the truth. This whole thing is not true, it's a lie. It's something fake. It's something made up. It's something secular. And if you'll allow me, it's also something demonic. It won't last. You know, even the Catholic Church kind of broke away from the Orthodox Church in a similar way. It had the same tendency of globalization, of expansion, of domination. The Catholic Church didn't stay in the Orthodox Church. It became something different. Unfortunately, it's not something we're happy about, because we pray for love, for unity, and for the return of all those who are misguided to come to the truth and to the Orthodox Church. But on the other hand, it is also a fact. There is this tendency for an all-Orthodox Russian world. And you see now we have essentially two parallel orthodoxies. It's the canonical Orthodoxy and it's Russian Orthodoxy. This is what we live today in our day. It is not pleasant. Personally, it's not something I accept, or I think it's right, or I bless it. Anyway, it's a reality, but I believe the Church will go forward, and at some point, we will all see the error of our ways, and we'll get right on God's path, so to speak.
Η Εκκλησία θα προχωρήσει και κάποια στιγμή θα δούμε όλοι τα λάθη μας και θα προχωρήσουμε σωστά στο δρόμο του Θεού, ας πούμε.
Τα πόνερα φτάνουν μέχρι την Αυστραλία.
Do the dirty waters of this situation reach you all the way in Australia?
Yes, they do. They even make it to Australia. They reach us. Because as you know, you don't need a boat to reach us in Australia. This was the case in 1950 and 1954. I once saw a man in Perth and he said to me, "Your Eminence, I left. I left on Christmas Eve from Piraeus and arrived in Australia on the feast day of St. Charalambos. So it took him all the days in January and a few days from December. 45 days in total to travel to Australia. Now they don't need that many days. Now it's a matter of a minute, not to say a second. With the internet, everything is open and transparent and public."
Μέσα σε όλο αυτό το χάρτη της παγκοσμιοποίησης και το διαδίκτυο.
In all this map of globalization for the internet that you mentioned and the speed you spoke about, the artificial intelligence that we now see in the news, where do you see the church, the real church, of course, as you put it?
The Church is real.
The church is real. Of course. Where can we find this exact spot at which it can speak to the human, can give a perspective?
Στον άνθρωπο μπορεί να δώσει μια προοπτική.
Δεν έχει αλλάξει, νομίζω.
It hasn't changed in 2,000 years. We have to offer, let's say, clean water. People today are looking for joy. They are looking for hope. Because they have lost it. And you see they have lost it. And they have lost it at a very young age. I go to our schools, Father Joseph sometimes, and what I find is that our children are expressionless. Whereas children should be full of life, full of joy, full of excitement. You see their eyes and they're like beads, like they're fake. They have no emotion, they have no expression. It bothered me for a while and I asked myself what was going on. Then I realized that the kids are bringing their problems from home to school, which are mom and dad fighting, brothers and sisters fighting or not fighting, their single-parent families, they're divorced, and 1,000 other problems that exist. Isolation. Isolation is a terrible phenomenon in our times.
Η απομόνωση. Η απομόνωση είναι ένα φοβερό φαινόμενο της εποχής. Η απομόνωση.
I said the day before yesterday, when I was in Larissa, I was referring to this issue, that in my years, when parents wanted to punish the child, they'd tell him, "You're going to your room," and they would close the door, and they'd isolate him, and that was his punishment. Now parents, if they want to give the biggest gift to their children, is to leave it alone in its room to do whatever it wants. Kids today are at their best, as we say.
Τα παιδιά σήμερα είναι οι καλύτεροι τους που λέμε.
As long as they have the cell phone with them.
This is always the given. Why? Because they go into their room and immerse themselves in their own world through the internet. This is the situation today. It's isolation. But it's not just about the kids now. In the home, the mother is in her own world. the father in his own world, and the children in their own world. And when they eat, because we have this phenomenon now, which is to sit down and eat together, which is nice, but they now also have the mobile phones in front, and all together we don't communicate. Take a walk in the center of Athens, and you'll see 5 to 6 kids sitting in the coffee shops, and again, they are not communicating either. They have the mobile phone in front. Altogether, there will be very little conversation. Everything revolves around and depends upon the phone. So this is an issue, the isolation, that makes you live in your own reality and in your own world. And to come back to what I was saying before, people are looking for joy, hope, because they lose it. And they lose it already in their childhood, from a very young age. Now, if the Church manages to convince them, first of all, what real joy is, and secondly, where they will find true joy. If the Church can convince them to stop knocking on that door, and that door, and that door, and knock on the real door. Come here where I can give you real and clean water. If this is done, then the Church has achieved its purpose. But there too we must be careful, because we have seen this many times. Our people come to us and ask us for bread, and we give them stones. And we have to watch this too, Father Joseph, very much.
Και εμείς τους δίνουμε πέτρες. Και θα πρέπει να το προσέξουμε και αυτό, Πάτερ Ιωσήφ, πάρα πολύ.
This is what I wanted to ask you. Is the Church experiencing this joy today?
I don't know if we live it. I can't judge. The Church lives it. Now the people of the Church, if we live it, is a question.
Είναι ένα ζητούμενο γι' αυτό.
Your Eminence, are you frightened of artificial intelligence?
No, nothing scares me. I'm not afraid of anything. I have hope in God. You know, humanity beyond the ecclesiastical and theological things has gone through terrible crises and managed to respond and overcome the crises. The environment is so strong, and that's why it's changing to be able to adapt to changes. I am not afraid, no. The human is strong in his environment. There will be interventions, but we will find our way.
Θα γίνουν παρεμβάσεις, αλλά θα βρούμε το δρόμο μας.
Do you personally have visions or desires?
Προσωπικά εσείς.
Αν αυτή τη στιγμή ήρθε ένας...
If at this moment an angel comes from heaven and says to me, God sent me, tell me what you want, I'll tell him nothing. I don't want anything. I'm very well, I'm very happy, I'm very fulfilled, I am very peaceful inside, I don't want anything. Only when death comes, at the moment of God's judgment, I wish to be in a state where I can look Christ in the eye.
Μόνο όταν έρθει ο θάνατος, τη στιγμή που θα κρίνει ο Θεός, να είμαι σε μια κατάσταση που να μπορώ να κοιτάξω τον Χριστό στα μάτια.
Your Eminence, in closing, if you could give one last message to the world watching us, what would you say?
Να ζήσουμε όλη τη ζωή της Εκκλησίας.
To live the whole life of the Church, which is beautiful. For everyone to live a spiritual life. Of course, if you ask me what the spiritual life is, I'll tell you it is loving Christ, not wanting to be saints, and not to judge. Love Christ, and to not care about what happens after we die. Not wanting to be saints, that is, to be free, and not even wanting this highest and most important thing, this good thing for ourselves and for our lives, and not to condemn our neighbor. Because many people think they are living a spiritual life while they judge other people, but the characteristic of the holy man is not to judge. And I want that to be passed on to our people.
Γιατί πολλοί νομίζουν ότι ζουν πνευματική ζωή και κατακρίνουν τον άλλο, αλλά χαρακτηριστικό του Αγίου ανθρώπου είναι το μη κατακρίνειν. Και θέλω αυτό να περάσει στους ανθρώπους μας.
Νομίζω ότι
I think we should just leave that as a conclusion to our discussion today. Your Eminence, it has been a great honor for us and a great pleasure. Thank you. I think we all should visit Australia at some time.
Σας ευχαριστούμε. Νομίζω ότι όλοι αξίζει να επισκεφτούμε κάποια στιγμή την Αυστραλία.
You are welcome and invited. Invited first and welcome second.
Thank you for everything, and may we have your blessing. Christ is risen.
May the Virgin Mary be with you. Truly, he is risen.
Αληθώς ανέστη.